everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Phil at the Movies. I'm your host, Phil Walsh, and this is episode number 141 of this ongoing podcast that is always for the love of movies. And today, as you can probably guess by the hat and the presence of the Santa Yoda behind my shoulder, we are in the midst of the holiday season, or more, I should say, the kickoff to the holiday season for the love of Christmas movies. And today we are going to be talking about perhaps an unconventional Christmas movie, but a Christmas movie nevertheless. The film is Terrifier 3. Now, for those of you who may not be, yes, there we go. Anthony has already got his shirt ready, so we're cooking tonight. Um, for those of you who may not be horror fans, as I know there are a number of you in the audience, tonight may not necessarily be your cup of tea, given the subject matter of this horror film, but I promise you there is some Yuletide commentary, as well as some surprising religious themes associated with this movie that, frankly, I have to say I was surprised going into this movie because given the fact that this movie is on its face about a psychotic mass murdering clown set during the holiday season, I wasn't expecting much in the way of subtext, but I am always delighted to be to have my priors proven wrong, so to speak, and that definitely happened with this film. But before we unwrap this present, before we decorate this tree, before we string up the lights, I want to welcome back to the show my friend and co-host of the DC Unlimited pod that we both do together with our friend Chris Evans. Welcoming back to the show, frequent guest, Mr. Anthony Caruso of Tis the Podcast, also known as Mr. Christmas himself. Anthony, welcome back, buddy.
Phil, always glad to be here. Always happy to be invited on your show. It's an honor. As you can see, I am in the Christmas mood as well here.
Very
And
good.
always happy to talk Christmas and always happy to talk Terrifier.
Oh, I know that, as we were saying off air, Michael Myers in Halloween is sort of my boy and my horror series, and I think it's safe to say that Art the Clown and the Terrifier series are very near and dear to your heart. They're the Halloween to my Halloween to your Halloween, or whatever the phrase is. But
If
before
you
we
if
go
you want
ahead.
an idea just how much, I think I got more texts or messages from people on Twitter on Terrifier 3's opening day than I did on my birthday. Just saying, enjoy. I know you've been waiting for this day. So there
That's
you
when you
go.
know you've crossed the Rubicon right there. That's a big deal right there. Right there. Before we begin, buddy, feel free to tell everybody listening or watching at home a little bit about your podcast because especially this time of year, this is when you guys really kick into maximum overdrive, so to speak. So to speak, you put that the pedal to the metal with that one horse open sleigh. So please, I'm bringing out all the Christmas metaphors tonight. So bear
I
with me.
appreciate it. I got to get you on to write our intros for Tis the Podcast, which is the name of my year-round Christmas podcast. I host it with my buddies Tom and Julia, and every Monday we release an episode all year round, dedicated to keeping the Christmas spirit alive. We talk a different Christmas movie, a television special, episodes of a TV show, and yeah, as it is December now, we are really in our busy season. Um, So check us out wherever you find podcasts. You can find us at linktree.com/tispodcast. We just dropped an episode covering some classic Disney shorts, including the beloved Pluto's Christmas Tree, for anyone who remembers that one from 1952. And the rest of the month looks stacked with some newer movies, including Red One, Dear Santa, and That Christmas on Netflix. So
Very nice, very nice, very holly jolly, as the saying goes.
exactly. And if you're Halloween horror fans, every October and September we delve into the horror realm. So if you're not into Christmas, go check out our horror episodes.
And I can attest to that, ladies and gentlemen. I have done a Halloween centric episode with these fine folks over there, and believe me, it was a hoot and a half, I must say. We talked Halloween kills and
And you will be back next year to talk Halloween Ends.
Oh, I've already got it written in the calendar. So looking forward to that one. That'll be a fun episode to say the least. Lots of opinions on that film. But switching it over to this film, and certainly a film that is, I think it's fair to say, is certainly unifying. Though it may not be everybody's cup of tea or a cup of cocoa in the general audience, Terrifier 3 has certainly carved out, no pun intended, a place with horror fans and even some perhaps morbid curiosity among general audiences. Let me just give you a brief synopsis of the plot, everybody, and then before we go into it, I'll give you a little bit of the fun facts surrounding it. So here is the plot. After surviving Art the Clown's Halloween massacre, Sienna and her brothers struggle to rebuild their shattered lives. As the holiday season approaches, they try to embrace the Christmas spirit and leave the horrors of the past behind. However, just when they think they are safe, Art returns, determined to turn their holiday cheer into a new nightmare. So this is the third installment in the Terrifier series, though Art the Clown has appeared in a number of different horror properties, going back, I think, 15 years now. Uh, Fun fact about this film, the budget was $2 million, which for those of you listening think, well, that's still a lot of money. And yes, it is, but for a horror film, it's really not that much. For an independent film, it's really little money. And when you look at the trajectory of this film's history in the past, I mean, $2 million is sort of nothing in the grand scheme of things, but compared to the other two films that preceded this one, where the budgets were we're talking, thousands of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. This is quite an accomplishment, given the fact that now this film is sitting on an $86.9 million box office intake. I believe, and Anthony, you probably would know better than I, this is the most successful unrated independent horror film of all time.
Of
Correct?
all time. Yep.
There we go. Folks, Terrifier 3, it may not be everyone's cup of Christmas cheer, but there is certainly a massive fan base that has begun in the wake of this terrifying and unsettling silent killer clown. And before we go into the film itself and talk about it, Anthony, I want to put to you this question that I think sort of will encompass much of what we're going to talk about here tonight. What do you think it is that audiences at large find appealing about Art the Clown and the Terrifier film series?
So that is a great question. I think it's a few different things. Number one, I think people just intrinsically from childhood have a fear of clowns. You could trace that back to Tim Curry's It, Pennywise in the It miniseries, the Joker and Batman. Clowns, while they are meant to be cheerful, are terrifying to a lot of people. So having a killer clown was always going to pique people's morbid curiosity, especially those of us who are into horror. Um, but it's more than that. I think his design is unique, and I really do think I think art in general is very much like Freddy in a way. He is not a silent, well, he's silent. He is not a faceless, masked figure. Just like Robert Englund is really the only person who could play Freddy. David Howard Thornton is the only person who could play Art the Clown. I don't think he gets nearly enough credit for what he does in this movies. The completely silent performance, his expressions, his expressive face, and his mannerisms and everything. And yes, the makeup helps a bit with that, but that's all him. Actually, as somebody who has done theater in school and stuff, mask training is actually really hard. So the fact that he's doing all of that and is turning such an iconic performance with the makeup and the prosthetics is really, I mean, not anybody could do it. And if you want proof of that, go back to the Ninth Circle and All Hallows Eve, where Art the Clown first appeared with its first actor, his first actor. I forget the gentleman's name, but the makeup was nothing special. The performance is nothing special. If they had continued with him, I don't think Art the Clown would have taken off and become the icon he is today. Um, and I do think he is an icon. I think the trailer's touted as iconic as Michael Myers and Freddy Krueger at this point, and I do think he is. I think he is the first real horror icon of the 2000s, probably since Ghostface. And I think that also is a reason for his popularity. People have been looking for that lasting character. And yeah, in terms of Terrifier's overall success, though, I think Damien Leone's vision of it, he's unapologetically gory and violent. And I think studios have sanitized their film so much nowadays that I think the independent nature of this film, where Damien Leone just has it financed himself, financed by a few friends, Kickstarter, everything like that, and just does what he wants and releases it unrated. It's like a throwback to the early 80s slashers where you could do the goriest, most disgusting things on screen, and it's campy and fun. It's just fun. It's a way to, I don't know. I mean, why do we like horror in general, right? Um, but speaking of fun, I think that's also why Art the Clown is so has been embraced by the public because it's a fun performance. You could tell he's having fun. Like Michael, Ghostface, Jason, they're just silent killers, right? For the most part. I mean, yeah, Ghostface has a voice, okay. But they're not expressive. It's like a job to them, right? Freddy has fun with what he does. He's a little sadistic, but Art the Clown has this like childlike glee, which we'll talk about when we really dive into this movie specifically. He loves what he does. And as disturbing as the images on the screen are, what he's doing, you can't help but laugh half of the time when he's doing it just because of his he's like a kid on Christmas morning with opening a gift. And yeah, I think it's a combination of all of that, like that appeals to people.
You make a very good point because we really haven't had any new horror icons, if you will, of this magnitude. I mean, I know some people may, say, "Oh, well, what about the Saw films?" Or, there's Pearl from the X films, and again, all noted. But I think when we're talking about reaching the level of Michael and Jason, and of course Freddy, you gotta be doing something really memorable. And I think the fact that this is a guy in a clown suit, that's sort of checking all the boxes right then and there. I mean, I think clowns are terrifying. I still am unsettled whenever I see a clown at a party or out at a carnival or something. They're weird. They're unsettling, and they make you want to go in the opposite direction. And this guy, it's the stuff of nightmares. But you make a point about it's fun. And I know some of you are going to think, oh my God, these movies are gory, they're grotesque. And noted, they are. They are gory, they are grotesque. But there's a there's a label that sometimes people throw out, oh, it's just torture porn. No, I don't buy that at all when it comes to these films because even though yes, it is graphic and it's unrated for a reason, there is an element of campiness to it, and I think that's partly because the guy doing it is in a clown suit. Like it's not just some sadistic weirdo, in a lumberjack outfit. I mean, like, it's a guy in a clown suit, and that's terrifying. That
And
no
I
pun
think
intended.
I mean, he's obviously Art the Clown, but I mean, probably a better moniker would be Art the Mime. Like the
Yeah,
silence of the performance is really, I think, what makes it as well. Like, I don't think he'd be anywhere near as iconic if he spoke.
I
I
agree.
mean,
I
this
agree.
guy's performance, even when he is getting into these final fights with the final girl and his victims, he doesn't make a sound. No panting, no screaming, no
It's
groans of pain.
just
It's
the
just the
expression.
expressions on the face. And I love that. And also, I think part of it is the mythology that Damien Leone is building. You hinted at the religious undertones. I mean, if you go back to the first movie, he was just a serial killer. A demon ended up resurrecting
Yeah.
at the end slash the beginning of the second one, and now he is some kind of demonic evil entity who our final girl has to find a way to stop. The whole our final girl we find out in this movie has been chosen by the angels, which I found really interesting. So
No, you've opened it up there. Let's unpack some of the religious subtext in this film because particularly in modern horror, I feel like if any film sort of addresses these themes or ideas, it's more just as window dressing, kind of to be glossed over and then we move on. But
mhm.
here it really feels like it is more than just subtext. It's really inherent to the narrative. I mean, yeah, I'm sort of jumping around, but you think of that scene at the very end where they put the cross of or crown of thorns around Sienna, like I mean, that's not by accident, folks. There's a real purpose to this, and the idea of her
Not
sort of
just
resurrection and powers greater than any mortal being. I mean, I think Damien Leone is he's more than just sort of giving us window dressing. He's really giving us something that's almost a an allegory for biblical tales of good versus evil.
and it's not just the crown of thorns. Remember, they literally smash her hands. What
Yeah,
did they do to when they
yeah,
crucified Jesus? They
yep,
nailed
yep,
his hands to the
yep.
cross. And her uncle's body was crucified to the wall. And then you go back to the end of the second one, she was resurrected. She died, and then some force, which we find out in this one, were angels,
Yeah.
resurrected her. So yeah, it's really interesting. And I'm in terms of where the franchise goes from here, I'm really excited to see how that played out because it seems like not to jump to the end.
Yeah.
Her cousin was taken into hell,
That
and
was, yeah.
she's really left in a. I mean, Sienna and Art both are both left in kind of despondent places at the end. Both she's kneeling at the end, covered in blood, vowing to find her cousin, while Art himself is covered in blood, just like almost catatonic, waiting for a bus
Yeah.
out of town.
Yeah, I know. They're both kind of in interesting places at the end of this movie, and we'll get to that as we go along. But I have to ask you because there was certainly a shock for me when this film decided to go with a Christmas theme because we don't necessarily, get a lot of Christmas horror films lately. I mean, you think of obviously the classics like Black Christmas or Silent Night, Deadly Night as examples, but the previous two films, and I think even the ones before it, have all been set or centered around or on Halloween. And
Mhm.
so this was a real change of pace and setting, and it really takes the story again to a whole other level. Whereas again, it's not just window dressing; it's more than that. Talk about the decision, the idea of making this a Christmas movie and where Christmas plays at it, kind of with the larger themes, as well as just sort of the fun of it. That's sort of an open,
Uh,
multi-part question. But
yeah. So, well, first of all, spoiler alert. It's a Christmas movie because I was the one man focus group for Damien Leone, and he knew I loved Art the Clown, and I said I love Christmas too. So it's like he made this movie for me.
we have the
Uh,
answers, folks. We have the answers.
I love that set at Christmas. I love that the previous one was set at Halloween. This one's set at Christmas because, in terms of annually rewatching them, I can rewatch one in October, one immediately after November, December. But no, it it makes sense it's set at Christmas for the religious themes he was injecting into the story. The birth of the savior, and I think that's really Sienna's story arc in this film, right? It's her realizing that she has been chosen for some reason, and she is the only one who can stop Art the Clown.
Mhm.
How she does that or when she does that remains to be seen. But the Christmas aesthetic, I think, and we've talked about this offline, Christmas and horror go so well with one another, and it's so underutilized. But just seeing the contrast of the most cheerful and wonderful and bright and time of year contrasting with absolute depravity and horror and blood on the snow. It's just such a cool juxtaposition that really, since Black Christmas and Silent Night, Deadly Night, no film has really managed to do very well.
Mhm.
I think this one did. Um, and I think Christmas as well fit Art's personality, his childlike glee, his his interactions with Santa in particular.
Let's get into that because this is probably I mean, I enjoyed the film much more than I honestly thought I would. And I remember telling you this that I was really surprised. Like, I mean, call me a convert at this point, to the Church of Art the Clown. At least one Arthur, got in some good
Oh.
clowning around this season, but we'll let that go. No, the whole Santa Claus sequence in this film, I mean, it was played heavily in the marketing. It really is some of the best. I want to be careful how I say this because I feel like there's something like sadistic going on here, but like it's so over the top, and it is so like if you were to distill down what is the Terrifier franchise, it really is the whole sequence. When he first sees Santa Claus or the guy playing Santa Claus in the bar, and I mean he's like a little kid because he's looking in the window. I mean it's like a throwback to like the ending of a Christmas Carol or something with like Tiny Tim is like looking out and pointing. I mean it's so like bizarrely innocent in a way
And he
because like
literally rushes in, pushing two drunk girls out of the way on his way in, who have the distinction of being the only two people who have run into Art in this
and
franchise of
survive.
living.
My theater when that scene happened had the biggest laugh of the entire movie. And again, it's only like, 2 seconds, but just him booking it with, of course, his bag of goodies down the stairs past them. It got such a rise out of the audience. But
And the
just
way he points at the mask and then points at Santa, like the decoration, like, oh my God, it's
it's you,
you.
it's you. No, and he's like, oh my, he's like playing along with him because he's just like miming these expressions. But I mean, it is it's both bizarrely innocent, but yet it takes that turn because
It's,
it is Art the Clown after all, and this is a Terrifier film. So
I got to say, it is the way Damien Leone slowly starts bringing Dread back into the scene, like
bingo.
right from the beginning when Art comes in and pulls on his beard, and fake Santa's like, "It's real. You can't be Santa without a real beard." You're like, "Uh oh, I know where this is going," because Art taps his head like, and you see in the marketing him with a suit, so you're like, "Uh oh, what's he gonna do with this beard?" um, but just to go back to the way he injects humor into the most violent of moments when he has his poor Santa stripped down to his underwear and tied up in the chair, and he's freezing him with his little nitrogen, liquid nitrogen gun. The guy is begging like for his life, like, hey, I'm not really Santa, man. I'm not really Santa. And Art the Clown's doing that expression like, okay, sure you're not. Uh-huh, sure, nice, likely story. It's just so funny. And just the way the guy tries to appeal to him. You're a clown, man. We do the same thing. We dress up and try to cheer people.
It was probably the most awkwardly funny and most unsettling scene I have seen in a movie this year. Like it was just, again, I never knew should I be laughing now or should I be like cringing and like shrieking at this horror because it is a perfect balance. Where again, in the wrong hands, it could either go way overboard or be just like slapstick in a way. And it again, it's a compliment to Damon Leone where he's able to just thread that needle ever so perfectly. Where like you're both marveling at what Art's doing and then being repulsed at the same time.
Yeah, and David Howard Thornton as Art plays it really well because one moment you're laughing at him, and then the next, like he's embodying this childlike innocence, but then the next, when he actually kills somebody, he gets a sadistic look and smile on his face. It like immediately snaps you back to reality. Like this is not a good guy you should be
Right,
rooting for,
right.
and you almost feel bad for laughing with him and at him for a moment.
That's right. Yeah, it's definitely it's a dichotomy of proportions. But
But
yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, just to talk about the childlike Glee for another minute. When he actually dons a Santa suit and goes to the mall, just the fun he's having sitting in Santa's throne, ho ho hoing, and then giving out legitimate gifts to kids, to
I
kids when
know
they start swarming him. And like the whole time you're thinking to yourself, okay, one of these gifts has to be something awful.
something. Yeah, this is not just innocent toys, guys.
But it's so funny, especially then when security comes to take him away and he gets petulant, starts pointing at himself, and then the Santa sign, like, this is my seat, this is my throne.
Completely
It's great.
indignant. No, again, it's a masterful performance. It really is, and it just sort of. I didn't think he could outdo himself from the last film because that was seemed to be like he was firing on all cylinders. But I mean, I guess put him in a Santa suit and like just let him go to town because it's like it's just it's wild to watch.
So I think also part of the reason it takes place at Christmas. Uh, so the last film, the second one think came out 2 years ago,
Yep.
2022. And I know there's a delay making this one because of COVID's restrictions still and, you know,
Just
funding and everything like that.
yeah, everything.
All the behind the scenes stuff. But I know Damien Leone has said in interviews if the kid who plays Jonathan, Elliot Fullman, who plays Jonathan, Sienna's younger brother, didn't sprout up like a weed and grow older and his voice deepened so much, he would have said it at that immediate Christmas, only 2 months later. But instead, he had to work with a time jump.
Right,
So I
because
think
it's
he
five
wanted it.
years.
Yep. I think he wanted a direct continuation. So to have it go right into the Christmas season, but just logistically, he had to age up the characters a bit. But I guess he liked the Christmas idea so much, he kept it. And you could tell Damien Leone has a real passion and love for the horror genre in general, but he had a lot of callbacks to Black Christmas in here,
Hmm.
Silent Night, Deadly Night, just in terms of imagery. Like Art the
Yeah.
Clown in the attic, covered in the cobwebs when he
Yes,
was in
yes.
stasis or
Yep.
hibernation or ever. That was right out of Black Christmas
Yep. Yep. No, I mean, even just like the iconic image of him in a Santa suit. I mean, that brings to mind
with the
any
axe. Yeah.
exactly. That's Silent Night, Deadly Night. I mean, that's what I really respect about Leon is because he's not just sort of doing this to make a buck, so to speak. I mean, obviously, he's done quite well with these films, but like this is not a cash grab. Like there is an artistic identity behind these movies, which, I know some, critics are like, oh, what do you know? This is nothing but a splatter fest. But no, there's real sincerity in, I mean, all of these films, but particularly with this one, where just, again, iconic imagery comes into focus. I mean, the fact that, again, this is set at Christmas time and you're taking all of those, you know, iconographies and different uh picturesque settings and sort of inverting them in a way like there's a way to do it where you're just like okay you're just making a mockery of it but he's doing it in a way where it is mocking it but it's in a tasteful way if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I think the Christmas setting as well really works for Sienna and Jonathan's story
Yeah.
because where they were left at the end of the second movie, their mom had just died, Sienna's friends had just died. And you find out at the beginning of this one, she'd been in and out of a mental institution, dealing with this trauma, and Jonathan's just kind of been running away from it. What better time of year to bring the family back together than Christmas to try to work through some uh,
Problems.
Yeah, there you go. And I think setting out Christmas aided that storyline in a way. If he made this a Halloween movie again, wouldn't have necessarily worked as well.
Well, it's also something refreshing in these type of movies where we get to see the characters outside of that particular night or setting. I mean,
Mhm.
you know, a Halloween film, 9 out of 10 is going to take place on October 31st. Maybe you might have the 30th or the 29th sprinkled in there, but I mean, generally speaking, you're within like a 2 day window in October, and we never see the characters, the rest of the year. So it's kind of refreshing to see these people interacting outside of where we left them last time, but also in a totally different environment, season, setting, etc., where we can see them grow, develop, but also sort of come to terms with everything as opposed to just being like, oh well, it's Halloween again, or it's Thanksgiving, like we better lock our doors or something. And I,
Right.
I found that to be really uh, kind of a nice change of pace with these kind of movies where generally you're going to be set on or around the same time frame.
And I'm all for give me more sequels with him at different holidays. Valentine's
Oh yeah,
Day,
yep.
4th of July, dress him as Uncle Sam, Art the Clown
Easter.
Wants You.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there we go. I like that. That's a good one. Um, on that point, because we sort of have been hinting around it, Sienna. I mean, this is her story, and we should note. I mean, this is not a situation where a la Halloween, we've been following somebody from the very beginning. Sienna is one of those cases where we're going to call her a final girl, and some might even say, an ultimate final girl. She enters in the second film, and she really has become the face of this franchise, along with Art the Clown. I made a tweet a while ago saying, this is the this generation's Laurie and Michael. And I, again, I'm not saying like, they're on the same level or anybody has surpassed, the iconic duo of Michael and Laurie, but in terms of just that sort of iconic status of a, you know, pure evil and pure good, like it's hard to say like there's been anyone really since Michael and Laurie. I mean, I know some might say, well, you've got Sydney and Ghostface, but
You
they
know, I would
change.
say that.
I know you would. No, we won't reopen that door. No, but like, Ghostface changes every movie.
Yep.
Michael is Michael, and I mean, yeah, there's Nancy and Freddie, but they don't have the same kind of long-standing rivalries like a Michael and Laurie. And it does feel like now with this film, and of course there's going to be another one, it really does feel like Sienna and Art are really entering the big leagues. Or I shouldn't say entering, they are in the big leagues. I mean, they were, there at the closing bell at the stock exchange on Halloween. I mean,
What? Who
like
would
how
have
much,
thought
like
that?
that's amazing. Like I was like, holy shit, that is incredible right there.
I'm so glad you brought up Sienna because I wanted to talk about, everyone praises David Howard Thornton as Art, but Lauren Lavera deserves so much credit as Sienna. She is fantastic.
She's the heart and
Um,
soul.
she really is. She proved to be a badass in the second one. That Angel Warrior costume is iconic at this point as well. Um, but in the third one, in this one, she really showed her range as an actress to show she could really do the emotional
Mm.
beats. Um, just the whole journey she goes on, the trauma she's suffering, the breakdown she's having. Uh, Her scene at the end where she's tied to the chair and watching her aunt and almost her cousin get killed, the breakdown she's having and then threatening to kill. It's so good. She is fantastic in the role. And you said it perfectly. Her and Art are an iconic duo at this point, and whatever their final ultimate face-off is going to be, I am here for it. I think they've earned it at this point. Like you really want to see her take revenge for everything she's lost, but also you really want to see Art get what's coming to him because as fun as he is to laugh with and laugh at, I think our buddy Chris said it best after this movie came out. He makes Freddy look like he makes Freddy not look sadistic, and Freddy, art is pure evil.
He makes Freddy look like Mr. Rogers. I mean, let's just
Yeah,
be honest. Like, Freddy's got, nothing compared to what Art's got up his sleeve or, garbage bag of tricks. I mean, it really is a frightening and just downright no good, rotten, clown yeah, he deserves what's coming to him. But, you sort of think of Sienna's story in this film. I thought it was really well constructed
mhm.
because obviously in these types of movies, particularly where you're following a sequel or what have you, we're going to meet our final girl and she's going to be going through the ups and downs, and there's always some sort of post-traumatic stress or sort of dealing with the scars and trauma of the past events. And I thought they really handled it quite well in this film, where
They
it felt realistic in a way, but yet it wasn't dominating the like, it didn't take away from everything else that was going on. I thought it was a real perfect balance where those scenes with her where she's just sort of like blaming herself and feeling, bad in many ways that she, survived the events of the last film, but yet it's done in a way that kind of feels like, yeah, that's how a person would react, even though this is an extraordinary circumstance, but like the way Lavera is able to just sort of channel that inner rage and turmoil. I mean, it's some of the best acting stuff, performances that I have seen this year, and I mean that full stop.
I know I fully agree with that. And I think that it was genius to really delve into her trauma in this movie because I love Halloween, I love Scream, and Sydney and Laurie obviously go through their own trauma, but they really focused on Sienna. She's still going through it, where we usually see Laurie and Sydney kind of at the tail end of it, and they're trying to move on with their lives.
Mhm.
And, but yeah, it was genius because, like you said, it felt real despite the circumstance so extraordinary. Um, just even the little ticks she has, like hearing the music in the store.
Yeah, when she's in the mall, she thinks she sees him. Yeah.
Yep. And you know, how she's triggered when people ask about like the podcast girl who comes up to
Oh,
her
right. Yeah.
at lunch, which granted, that girl was annoying and was very pushy. But before
I,
she even started prying, just like, oh, you're Sienna Shaw, just that was enough to set her off.
right.
And, just a little hints of story you get. Like there's a line in there, I think, from the podcast girl that if her brother hadn't testified in her behalf after the events of the second movie, she'd be in jail because the cops just assumed it was all her friends and her mother who died. And of course, nobody's going to believe a demonic clown sent you to hell and like you resurrected and cut off his head, especially when the body went missing.
Yeah.
Um, so I just love the little seeds of the story they're planting. And one of the things I really want to see in the next movie is more backstory on her and more backstory on Art. And I'm not normally one for backstory on my villains, but we can talk about that in a second. But Sienna, they started laying the groundwork here with their father, how he created this character for her,
Right. Right.
how he kind of had a premonition about the sword and bought her the sword. I want to find out more about what's going on there. Like why, the demons clearly targeted Art. Why did the angels choose her specifically? Like why did they give her dad these visions? I really want to like the mythology Damien Leone is building here that's carrying from movie to movie. I think that's part of the appeal of this franchise because you don't really get that in Scream or Halloween. You're told Michael's the boogeyman, but you don't really. I mean, they tried it with the Cult of Thorn trilogy to
Look,
whatever.
look how that turned out.
Yeah, but I think it's just so unique and different. And yeah, Lauren Lavera is great, and I can't wait to see. She was dealing with trauma in this. In this one,
Oh
she
boy.
saw her cousin get dragged to hell, and now she's a lone survivor. So how's she going to be in the next one? And I can't wait to see the rage and sadness that she instills a character within for.
But before we move on to that, I just have to ask, do you think Jonathan is actually dead?
I'm of two minds.
Okay.
One, I feel
I'm
like
curious your
he's too
thoughts.
important to kill off screen, and I
Well,
feel like we saw Art the Clown go into a crowded frat house. He could have killed anyone, taken anyone's head, and they could have just triggered her that way.
right.
Um, Especially because we know they already lied to her earlier, pretending it was her cousin. So, on the other hand, I could see him actually being dead. And at some point, I assume she's going to journey into hell. I assume this next movie is going to be the most outlandish of them all. If she's rescuing her cousin, I could see him appearing to her as some kind of apparition in the afterlife as well. But I don't think we've seen the last of him either way.
That's where I'm at. I'm sort of going down the middle with that. I think it's one of the two, but yeah, we haven't seen the end of Jonathan. He's too important of a character to just sort of relegate to a an off-screen death, if you will.
I do want to praise Elliot Follman's acting and his
Yeah,
portrayal of his PTSD too, because um, he went for his character, they went a completely different way. Where Sienna was in and out of mental institution, she was having the breakdowns and everything. He just tried to bury it all and move on,
yeah,
like
he
have
ran
the
away
normal
from it.
college
Yeah,
experience.
college. Yeah,
He didn't want to. He seemed very reluctant every time to interact with his sister because she was dragging out memories, I guess, interacting with her. So I thought it was very good how they gave them two very unique experiences. I appreciated that in the writing and the plotting of the story.
yeah. It's funny when I was watching this movie, it brought to mind in a comparison that I never would have made, but Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. I feel like this movie did what Rob Zombie was probably going for with that film vis-a-vis Laurie and Annie's post-traumatic stress and how they were dealing with their own trauma. Now, again, everyone knows who's listened to this show from the beginning. I have no love or respect for Rob Zombie's Halloween films, but it was interesting watching this film. I was like, okay, in the right hands, that probably could have been a compelling story. But I put that as an aside, of course.
Let me tell you, if Sienna's mom, who died in two, comes back in a white dress with a white horse in number four, I'm out. That's
Oh no, I don't
jumping the
blame you.
shark for
I
me.
don't. No, I don't. I have. I think David Leon is too plugged in and knows his material not to go down that path. But no, well, it's good. It's good to know that you have standards, so that's good. That's good. Um, no, you make a great point about the mythology of this film and sort of. I mean, this is a very sort of exposition heavy film in a way that the other ones were not. And it does feel like it's building towards, again, we've talked about it, it's almost something biblical in a way. And I'm normally like you, I'm very much opposed to explaining away the villain because I think sometimes as has happened with Michael, you take away from their mystery and surprise. Art is a different kind of villain though, and I think you need to have some kind of explanation, if you will, because there's a lot going on here. This is not just Psycho Clown versus Final Girl. This is a battle of biblical proportions. You've got someone who has been targeted, possessed by demonic entities, and someone who has been anointed by the angels. I mean, this is end of the world type stuff, rapture like events, and I'm very much appreciative of that, and I want to see more of okay, why was Art the vessel? Why is Sienna the vessel? I think that could be very fascinating and give us something totally different that we don't normally get from these movies
Well,
because I mean, generally speaking, the formula is there, killer versus final girl, and they battle to the end and then they come back for the sequel. Like this feels like we're on familiar ground, but we're really digging into something new and different.
well, for our, I think they kind of alluded to it in this one, at least Jonathan's researcher ever, like the body, like somebody, a truly evil soul. Like, so we know through the first Terrifier, he was just a human serial killer.
Right.
But I want to find out more, like, to your point, what made him so, I mean, what made him so bad? We saw what he did in the first one, but you know what I mean?
No,
Like,
I know
how
what you're
long
saying.
has he been at it? What's his deal? Like, you saw newspaper clippings in the second one that he killed that little Emily Crane girl who then became the little pale girl in his visions and everything. Like, I want to know his backstory, like, which is something you'll never hear me say about Michael or any, I didn't need Freddy's backstory. I didn't need Michael's,
No.
Jason's, whatever. Give me Art's. But yeah, and why did they choose Sienna? That's what I'm more curious about that than even why the demons chose Art. And how does she defeat him? Because she has stabbed him with the sword. She's beheaded him with the sword, but he doesn't stay down. So do they both have to die in the end? Like, are they going to go out taking, is that the only way to take him out, to go out yourself? I don't know. But I'm curious about it. But they even laid some seeds as well in this one. She had that vision of like that demonic creature chained up, making her sword and her angel armor, like in chains, being held by the statue of the Virgin Mary. Like, I'm so curious to see where four goes. Like, because it's almost set up to be more fantasy horror, almost like Army of Darkness,
Yeah.
like
Which
for
is
four. But at the same time, does he want to divert from the formula that's made this little indie gem so successful by having it basically be like a journey through hell or like a fantasy world? Like, I don't know. I'm curious to see what he does.
yeah, that's interesting because everything has worked so far with what he's done. I almost feel like there's almost carte blanche at this point to do whatever works. Do whatever makes you happy, and the audience will follow because I think there is such an investment. I mean, I do like part of me thinks, yeah, just go wild, go for broke, but then at the same time, I'm like, well, maybe not go too far into the fantasy because then you're sort of, you know, to quote Randy from Scream, you lose your target audience.
And for all intents and purposes, the next one, even though it's four, is really the third in the trilogy because you could really remove the first one.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, the only thing you need to know from that one is he died and was resurrected at the very end. But they recap that at the beginning of the second one anyway. So
Yeah.
this is really the third in the Sienna art trilogy, and we all know what Randy says about third ones.
No,
They're never as good
I
as the first two.
I'll see if the rules apply on this one or not. But no, that's a good point. Uh, Go
But I
ahead.
do have respect. I mean, and we'll see what happens. Plans change and
Oh
everything. But
yeah.
Damian Leone has been very adamant in interviews. He does not want to go on forever. He wants to have a satisfying conclusion. He doesn't want to go on for like six, seven, eight, nine until Art's in space and I appreciate that. So I really do hope, I really, and I'll take him at his word. If four is not the last, I think five will be. But it seems like he is starting to lay seeds for the end game here. So I think, you know, and will Art stay dead? No horror slasher ever does. There's money to be made, but
I mean, the beauty is here. Damon Leone owns this franchise, literally and figuratively. And in a lot of ways, I hope it stays that way. I hope he
mhm.
keeps studios out of it because one, no studio would make this film, even though they know how successful it is. No studio would release this film. They would
Yeah.
sanitize it. They would cut it down. There'd be probably unrated cuts for home video, but no studio is going to get behind this. We're not going to
Well,
see
he said he took meetings with a few studios in between two and three, and every single one said they didn't want to do the opening scene where Art kills a family, including a kid off screen.
yeah.
And that's not even the most brutal thing in the movie by a long shot. So if they don't want to do
No.
that, could you imagine how they would have sanitized the rest of the film?
Bingo. I mean, you're not going to show, the mall scenes or the chainsaw, showdown would have been probably hacked to pieces. No, I hope he stays true to that. I think he will. And there's a part of me that's like, you know what? Let it go with like if you want to do five films, bring us to that conclusion. Do something completely rare in the horror genre and give us a true ending for
And
a character like this. Because I mean, again, we all know Michael will return again. It's only a matter of time before Freddy and Jason are resurrected. It would be different to actually have a definitive end to a franchise like this.
exactly. And look, even if he wanted to go back and tell stories of one-off movies where Art's just a serial killer clown, like the first one.
Oh, sure. Yep.
Like you could then do it without touching your main story or ruining that main story and going on too long and making that story like, okay, bring it to an end already. It's getting
Right.
ridiculous. It's Sienna and him. So there are ways if you wanted to. But I agree. Like end it 4 or 5, give us a nice tight story that people can look back on and be like, you know what? Maybe future filmmakers could be like, I'm not going to run my horror character into the ground.
No, there's a lesson to be learned there. We
Um,
haven't go no, go ahead.
oh, I want to see where you were going because I was about to pivot somewhere else and I want to see if you were going there because it's not something we've touched on yet.
No, I wanted to touch on the epic battle between Sienna and Art, and get your thoughts with that because this was not like the last film, which I think we were probably all surprised with how that went with her, of course, coming back, from the dead with the sword and then, cleaving his head right off. This is a much different fight, and it's very brutal. It's very up close in a lot of ways. I felt very claustrophobic watching this fight, and maybe it's because of the setting of the house and just sort of the way the stakes have been raised at this point. But I actually thought this was actually in a lot of ways more satisfying because it was so unpredictable.
I agree. It was so knockdown, drag out. And they utilized everything in the house so well. But like the sword against the chainsaw,
Yeah,
it
epic,
was so
epic.
cool. And he's wearing the Santa hat the whole time, even though
I
he's in the
know.
regular clown suit.
Nice
But the
touch.
way they're throwing each other around, like it was violent. Like, and I'm gonna point out a moment in during this fight that made me laugh as well because it shows that they can still have fun and be playful in the humor. Um, when they're on the ground and he's trying to force her face into the chainsaw, which is revving by, right inches of her face. She reaches up and grabs him in the crotch and just squeezes. And this demonic clown, who is like immortal, basically, literally does a shocked face of pain and keels over, which again, completely it's just hilarious. So the way they inject levity into this really brutal uh, climax is great. And then even the disgusting stuff, like you don't expect him to shove her face into her uncle's chest cavity, but like it's so disgusting that after you're like, ew, you can't help but let out that laugh, like kind of to release the tension, you know? But it is so cool. And this kind of goes nicely into what I want to talk about as well, because we haven't touched on Samantha Scafidi's Victoria yet.
Yes. Thank you.
And
Thank you for bringing that up.
she had such a big role in this movie, specifically the climax of the movie, and she is great. Like the makeup is horrifying, but just I mean, it would have been very easy for a lesser actress to kind of find herself lost in between David Howard Thornton and Lauren Lavera in a
Yeah.
climax, but she held her own and she was damn good. And she was really scary, especially when she put that clown makeup on. But her everything about her in that climax too, mocking the aunt as she's dying, mocking the little girl and Sienna, laughing at them, trying to possess Sienna, like so good. And it was so satisfying when Sienna takes that sword and impales her with it.
It's funny because normally with these kind of films, I'm generally opposed to like a partner in crime for the main antagonist, but it works so well here, and maybe it's just because of the backstory with this particular character. It's not just like, oh, let's give Art, a playful sidekick. Like this is not just like, oh, let's bring in Robin for Batman. Like there's a whole reason for her. And yeah, she's bloody terrifying. Like there are moments in this film where she's almost creepier than Art in a way, if that makes sense. Like I mean, Art is
100%.
terrifying, but just again, I think maybe it's just because of the way she's like in your face about it. Like she like yeah, you see that. Yeah, you're glad she gets stabbed. It's like it's like just be gone, demon. Like
Yeah, 100%. And like to your point that she's scarier than Art at times, there are moments, especially the beginning of the film, where they show shots of Art after she says or does something, and he looks a little unsettled by her too,
right.
which is great. Like you want to like make a terrifying character, have her terrify your sadistic clown killer.
He has
Um,
standards.
yeah, no, but she is great. Like her acting though in the climax specifically, just the way she's mocking them, and
It's
she
twisted.
goes from mocking to like I love her change in voice when she's trying to possess Sienna and Sienna fights back against it. And all of a sudden she drops the mocking tone and everything. She's just like, wow, I can see why the angels chose you. Like, it's really good
Yeah.
performance. And I hope we haven't seen the last of her, slash, I don't think we have. She probably just went back to hell.
That's what I was gonna
But
say. I mean, yeah, you could read it, maybe she's dead, but I mean, no one ever dies in a horror movie anyway, and I'm sure she'll be resurrected in the pits of hell.
well, either that or the demon that was in that body possessed Art at the end, because somehow Art lived. I don't know, because it's the
Well,
same demon who is the little pale girl in the second one, so it likes to jump bodies.
well,
But
that's a good point. That's a good point. Maybe she's inside Art. That's
but you
frightening.
know, yeah, it is. But to your point, this is another character, the types of which we haven't seen in horror before.
Yeah.
Like she started out essentially as our final girl of the
I know
first
that
movie,
that's
and
what I
you
mean about the
never see a
backstory. Yeah.
final girl go crazy like this. Like now I know it's something people have wished for Gail and or Sydney and Scream after they've been attacked so many times. You would think one of them would turn psycho, but
Yeah.
yeah, I love it. I like just the trajectory. Like in some ways, this is classic 80s slasher fare, but in other ways, he's doing something completely unique. And I think that's part of the appeal. It's
Yeah.
both nostalgic and new.
That's perfectly said. It honors the past, but it embraces the future in a way that is both fun and terrifying at the same time. I mean, it's a perfect mixture in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
Now
And
I ha
yeah, go on.
no, I have to ask just because we've sort of we've danced around a number of these. The Terrifier films, of course, are known, ladies and gentlemen, for the kills, and certainly, you know, horror fans, you know, worth their salt, you know, have certainly, you know, could reference, you know, one if not more from any of these films, but particularly the last two, where there have just been, you know, almost hate to say iconic moments, but I guess that's what we're gonna say these days. What is your, and again, forgive the question, what is your favorite kill from this movie?
From this one. Okay, so I don't think anything touched the bedroom scene in the second one. The bedroom scene was just pure evil,
Yeah.
especially when he brings out the salt and the bleach and
Uh,
just starts rubbing it in.
yeah. Yeah.
But I think mine is probably the shower scene. Um, first of all, the lead up to that scene where he's eavesdropping on them in the dorm room and he's reacting to things they're saying in the hallway got huge laughs in my theater. You talk about like just fun, playful art. Like when they're comparing him to Jack the Ripper and he's in the hallway like stop like and then it's the guy's like it sounds like you want to sleep with him and she's like I don't want to sleep with him and he's like just it's very funny. And but again then they inject that dread because she's like I just want to know what it's like to stare into eyes of somebody that evil to see if there's anything there, and you can see the wheels in Art's head turning at that moment, and it pays off in the shower like 2 minutes later where she's on the floor bloody and bleeding out. He takes off the Christmas sunglasses and just smiles at her as he leans in to look right in her eyes. So good. And also just I mean, what he does to the guy with the chainsaw, number one, I hope this dispels for people out there the idea that Art and Damien Leone are misogynistic because he only kills women. I never bought that argument. Number one, it's a horror movie. Most of these horror icons do target teenage girls. It's just a tropey thing. But two, he went to town on this guy just as much as he did to any girl in any of the previous movies. But what makes it both funny and more horrifying is as he's chopping this guy to bits, as we're seeing everything, they play that original Terrifier Christmas song over the entire kill scene. And when you listen to the lyrics are violent and gory and everything, but it's sung by a choir with bells. It sounds like a Christmas. It's so good. It's so fun. If you can say that about a kill scene.
I kept waiting for, Carol of the Bells to break out as the song. No, it does bring to mind that, or, the Mormon Tabernacle Choir or something, belting on any number of Christmas tunes. No,
And then just one last thing, the
no, no,
cherry on
no.
top of the scene where he's doing the blood angels in his blood on the bathroom floor. It's perfect.
I'm going to have to agree with you. I think that is the one from this film. The beginning where he breaks into the house at the beginning, that's a great way to set the tone of this film. But I think just from, an iconic status, yeah, the chainsaw in the shower, that felt very 80s to me. And like again, a lot of modern horror films, particularly slashers, with Terrifier being really the notable exception, kind of gloss over a lot of the moments that were big in the 80s. Like you think of a Friday the 13th film, any number of them. The deaths in those films, particularly in the beginning, uh, first couple, I mean, they're imaginative, they're over the top, they're bloody, they're gory. Like, I mean, I think of that scene from the very first one where Kevin Bacon gets
Mm-hmm.
the arrow through the throat while he's sleeping on the cot. Like just that kind of iconic imagery. And that's what this scene reminded me of, just sort of that a throwback to the bloody spectacle of, either whether like it's Silent Night, Deadly Night, or any number of the Friday the 13th films, or even some of the early Halloween movies. It just felt like, all right, let them, the master is going to work right now, and so be it.
Well, not only that, not in terms of um, how reminiscent the kills are in that regard, but also since Scream, a lot of horror has shied away from the gratuitous nudity and sex.
Right.
Um, Especially like the past decade or so when we've gotten elevated horror and everything. And I'm not saying you need it or anything like that. Don't get me wrong, I'm not one of these people online who are like, oh, there's too much sex and nudity in movies. Like, whatever, that's a stupid
Let me
comment
let me
argument.
clutch my pearls. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Um, but it's weird to say that I like that Terrifier is almost bringing that back because that is such an 80s thing, too. That was always, I mean, it's one of Randy's rules: don't have sex. The
Right.
killers go after, I mean, that was a big thing. Like, you want to read into it. It's like they were punishing people for having sex out of marriage, doing drugs, doing drinking.
Right.
And Terrifier really has kind of been bringing that back with the nudity and sex as well, which I again, it just feels like a throwback, and it feels like Damien Leone is really like just a fan of the classics in the genre, and I appreciate that a lot. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with that because there's nothing in this. I mean, again, I'm not saying these movies are for everybody. Again, not every audience, not even some horror fans. I get it, but nothing feels gratuitous with
Hmm.
these films, despite the nature and sometimes this the outcome. It does feel like it's a respect to the past. And I, again, as a fan of the genre, and particularly a lot of 80s centric horror movies, that's right up my alley. And I have a
Hmm.
soft spot for anybody that kind of does a hat tip and a nod to that era because it is iconic.
Absolutely. And speaking of iconic, and I'll tell you the kill scene that got me. Like I'm so decent, like you probably, and a lot of our friends, like Chris. We're such horror fans.
Yeah.
We're so desensitized. Like a lot of these things don't really make you wince or like. But there was one kill scene in this movie that did it to me, and it was the ant at the end, where they shoved a plastic tube down her throat and start feeding the live rats to her. That really
That was
made me
gnarly.
uncomfortable and made me feel a little squeamish.
Yeah, that was gnarly. I'm rats are creepy, in any context, but yeah, yeah, co-sign with you there. Co-sign with you there. And again, like I'm not a prude or anything, but it's yeah, that was a little tough to watch. But again, you expect that. Like nobody should think going into a film like this that Damien Leone is gonna hold back. That doesn't happen with the Terrifier film. You know what you're getting. These films are unrated for a reason.
Right. And yeah, yeah. I did appreciate though before the ant died, he gave her a little badass moment and had her say to Sienna, "I'd kill these two fuckers." Like I appreciated that. I'll tell you another scene I appreciated if I could just
Yeah, no,
scenes are
again,
popping in my head.
go wild.
I loved when we got the flashback to the aftermath of Halloween 5 years ago. We saw Art's headless body go to the hospital and everything and kill Chris Jericho and break Victoria out. I then loved him and Victoria on the subway, and the guy gets on dressed as Art the Clown.
Ah,
It's like, oh, awesome costume, man. I wanted to do a bloody too, but couldn't get to work. You look so much better than I do. Can I get a picture? And they are just playing along and like smile and everything. And then quick cut to the next scene. Art's in a pristine, clean costume. You just know he killed the guy and took his clothes. Loved it.
again, the showmanship of Art is another, I think, underappreciated aspect of his character because, he's not just a thug in a suit. There's a genuine performance. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was either you or somebody on Twitter posted that like this is one of the year's best performances, and you won't hear it from the so-called respected critics. And I mean I would just say yeah, like to do what he's doing in this film requires a great amount of concentration and just organic talent.
I don't think people appreciate how hard it is to do what he's doing. Like, and in fairness, it probably is hard for like any mime out there in real life, right?
Right.
Like, but like to do the whole mime act and remain silent while you're acting and you're furthering the story, like that's a lot of wheels turning at once and a lot of things he has to balance, and he does it perfectly. And yeah, it really is. Like, I mean, it's never a performance that's gonna get award recognition,
No, no,
obviously, except
no.
for, maybe the Fangoria Blade Disgusting Awards.
Right.
Or if there was any justice, he'd get that. But I mean, it is one of the year's best. Like, and I truly do believe that. Like, again, I said it at the beginning, it's hard to imagine anyone but Robert Englund playing Freddy because he's become one with the character.
Right.
I don't think Art the Clown would be as popular or these movies would be as popular if it was anyone else in the makeup and the prosthetics.
No, and again, you raised the point of the original actor, and I believe it was Mike Giannelli was the
Yep.
original performance. And again, no disrespect to him, but it's just an unmemorable performance. Like it's just a guy in a clown suit, whereas David Howard Thornton, I mean, he's doing something like he's channeling some kind of magic or satanic power because it is one for the books. I mean, the guy is already iconic. I mean, yeah, probably if you were to have a Mount Rushmore, I think you got Michael, you got Freddie, you got Jason, and I think you got Art. I really do, and I know you probably would agree with that.
Absolutely. And I thought he had reached that status at number two, but definitely with number three. And I don't think we're in the minority anymore
No,
saying that either.
no, I
Um,
think so.
but to your point about him being a performance, like the character having showmanship, yeah, you see that a lot, especially in the previous two movies. I go back to the first one. He would get annoyed, like fighting those girls when he would have to knock them out or kill them early with the needle because they interrupted his fun. But like he would do these just little things, like when he would drug the girl with the needle after struggling with her, and she would collapse in his arms, and he would almost do this like ta-da thing to nobody in particular because no one's around to watch it. Like it's all a game to him, and it's weird to say I love that, but I love that.
No, it's that's what makes I think his character so memorable is that it's more than just iconic costume and clown attire, but it's the whole performance of it. It's the showman aspect, and that's again something that we don't get from a lot of these horror icons. I mean, like you know,
They try to do it with Freddy, but Freddy takes us such a
Freddy
they
goes over
do
the line. He
yeah.
really does. I take that
Yeah.
back. Take Freddy off of Mount Rushmore. I think. No, we want to.
Ghostface instead of Freddy.
There were. That's better. No, I mean, I know we've opened Pandora's box, but that, here come the, don't upset people who love Nightmare on Elm Street, but that's for another discussion. Because
I will say
I have thoughts.
if you were ever gonna put art in one of those versus movies, I think Freddy would be the natural one because he's the only,
Oh, definitely.
he's the other demon, right? So it'd
Yeah,
be cool to see those two go up against one another. But
especially one who talks too much.
to one who doesn't talk at all,
Right. So
who, even though he's more evil, you'd all be rooting for because we hate Freddy.
no, I. You said it. You said it.
Direct all hate mail at the Sanderson Bro on Twitter.
You said it. I gave you the platform. No. Um, so before we get out of here, buddy, any last thoughts on Terrifier 3? I mean, frankly, we could do, a 2 hour show just on each individual movie alone, but any final thoughts, any theories, any hopes for the future?
Yes, but before I get into my final thoughts, can I mention one more thing about the movie?
Go
So
wild.
I've been an Art the Clown fan from the beginning, like the Ninth Circle, All Hallows Eve, when it wasn't David Howard Thornton. I just thought the character had potential. But for fans who know the origins of art, Damien Leone's talked about it, where he said in his head he wrote a short story about a woman alone on a bus at night, and a clown gets on and sits opposite her, and he's completely silent, but he starts interacting with her. At first, it's cute, but he gets more and more aggressive as the bus ride goes on until he's scaring her. And that was really the conception he had for art in his mind. So I love that the movie ends with him finally putting that on screen when Art boards this bus. First of all, the woman's reading The Ninth Circle, which
Yeah.
is Art's first appearance, which I loved. But he sits directly across from her and just unnerves her. And then the final shot of the movie is him raising that horn and just honking it in her face. I loved that. So I loved that he, one, brought his own history for the character to the screen, but for all the fans who've kind of been with Art from the beginning or have been invested in this character from the beginning, he kind of brought that to life. So just wanted to say that and acknowledge that. Final thoughts. So Terrifier 3, um, I know you at the end of the year, beginning of the year, do the top five from the previous year. And I know me, you, and our buddy Chris have been talking about it in our private group chat. Both of you are shocked to learn that my list, as it stands right now, doesn't have Terrifier 3 in the top.
Yes.
It
Yes.
is in the top 10, but not my top fives. Um,
Let me guess, Joker is in there.
no, it's not.
Good man. Good man. No.
but he and I explained it to you guys. It's hard for me to balance my own personal preferences and my own uh subjectivity with objectivity, and or the rewatchability with just what a good film is.
Mhm.
So even though Terrifier 3 is not in my top five films of the year, I have no doubt that out of everything that came out this year, this is probably the one that will get rewatched the most, or one of the ones that will get rewatched the most, at least annually around Christmas time. I love this film. I loved seeing Art as Santa. I love seeing him at Christmas. I love seeing the progression of him and Sienna, and I can't wait to see how their conflict plays out in four. Um, and I would also say, reiterate what you said. This film is not for everyone. This franchise isn't for everyone. But if you're art curious or Terrifier curious, I would, out of all of them, I would probably say, as violent as it is, Terrifier 3 may be the most palatable, because I think it is also the most fun and the most playful. And I think the Christmas setting also does a little bit to help ease it as well. So if you are curious, give it a watch. And I'd say that. As for hopes for the future, um, I hope Damien Leone sticks to his plan, doesn't drag this out much longer, one or two more films max, as he's been talking about. Besides backstory for both Art and Sienna, do I have any wishes? I just want a satisfying ending. I'm along for the ride. He hasn't disappointed me yet. I'm loving the mythology. I just want answers at this point.
Mhm.
Um, if I had any predictions, we're going to see Jonathan again in some way, shape, or form. And I'm kind of the mind right now that Sienna may have to die to take down Art permanently. And that may be the final conclusion, so you can't continue either of their stories and give it the definitive ending. Um, which I'm not opposed to if done correctly.
You can't
So,
have a villain without a hero, and you can't have a hero without a villain. So they
as
they do complete each other.
as I was about to go to a Joker quote too, as he would always say to Batman, "You and I are destined to do this forever." Michael and Laurie, Sydney and Ghostface, Art and Sienna. I think I, in some ways, I think that would be Sienna's happiest ending, since she has dealt with so much trauma and loss. If she had to go out taking him out, and she could die the hero. But I don't know. We'll see what Damien Leone has in store for us. But I'm along for the ride, and I'm just glad he and David Howard Thornton and Lauren Lavera are all getting the accolades they deserve now. And it's truly, as a aspiring creative myself, I write as somebody who likes to tell stories. There is something, I think, whether or not you're a fan of this franchise, everyone can appreciate how it's become the little engine that could.
Yeah.
And this little Cinderella story. I mean, go back to All Hallows Eve, which was made on a shoestring budget. Terrifier 1 was what, $100,000? Not even. I think I want to say maybe less than that, 10 to 50,000. I don't know.
35 to $55,000
Yeah.
was, yeah. So just
Its
an
second
idea.
one was, I think, 200,000, and to go to 2
Yep.
million and just getting more and more returns on their investment each time, and seeing Art and Sienna have reached this iconic status as killer final girl, like this iconic level. There's something we can all appreciate about that story, and how Damien Leone just, it should inspire all creatives and indie
Mhm.
creatives to just pursue your dream, stick to your gut, stick to your story, believe in your story, and see where it takes you. So yeah, Terrifier, man. I love it. Terrifier 3, loved it.
Well, that was beautifully said, my friend. And I know there is no bigger fan of this franchise than you. And again, just to see your enjoyment and appreciation for the franchise, for the behind the scenes. I mean, I felt like I was living vicariously through you with your hype and anticipation for this film. And again, I'm so glad that it delivered for you. And I'm so glad in many ways that I gave these films a second chance, which is not something that always happens with movies in general, particularly films of this kind, because they're, as I said, they're not for everybody. But I am glad that I did not write off Art the Clown. I may have wrote off Arthur the Clown, but that's again, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I had to do it. No,
I hope my passion for helped inspire you to revisit.
it honestly it did. Again, just seeing your hype and interest and excitement for just not only this film but the entire series, I was like, okay, being a horror fan myself and a connoisseur of the genre, I figured I've got to give these another go. And I am glad that I did because I would say for me this is my favorite of the three thus
Mhm.
far. I just think with the Christmas setting and the the rich mythology that is established, I'm like, yes, more of this, please.
And just Damien Leone is getting better as a filmmaker due to the higher
Yes.
budgets. The production design between this and one, night and day. Even this and two, like this felt like a lived-in world.
Well, I like how he also has taken both positive and negative criticisms and turned it into something constructive. He's
Yeah,
not just
absolutely.
been like this big ego, no, it's my way or the highway and you're all wrong. Like he's always going back and trying to perfect his craft, his story, and that's frankly inspiring and not something that you see a lot in this industry. But also
I'm about to
just
say I gotta keep my mouth shut and not piss off any of your listeners by naming a few directors I think could take that lesson, but
we'll do that for the after hour show. No, but like again, just his own, fortitude with his vision. I mean, no compromise, man. That is something that I do appreciate. And again, he could have sold this out. He could have handed it off to a major studio, but it wouldn't be true. Like he has a vision and he's ultimately working towards that. And you said it right. It's the little engine that could. And everybody loves those kind of success stories, particularly when everybody behind it seems genuine and heartfelt and actually interested in what they're doing. They're not just there for a paycheck. Like they're there
Mhm.
because they love the craft, they love the world, they love the genre, they love these characters, and they want to keep putting it out there. And again, just look at the response to this film. I mean, I knew when they made it to Wall Street for the closing bell, I said, okay, we're in Art the Clown's world at this point.
Yeah, I mean, and you could tell just from like even from the second one, just the amount of the world premieres they had for this one compared
Yeah,
to like the last two, like
bingo.
you could tell it was something, it's become something special. And I only think it's going to get bigger. Whether the reception to the next one will be as high as the past two, we'll see. But I think that I don't doubt it'll probably make even more money.
I think $100 million plus is on the table for sure. But time will tell when it releases, but certainly I will be there. And again, I really have to thank you for that, my friend, because you made it possible. So applause for you on that one. Uh,
That
you,
makes me so happy.
you made an art fan out of me. So there we go. But well, buddy, thank you for coming back on the show for this semi-holiday centric episode. I know we're not, talking about It's a Wonderful Life or White Christmas here or the Santa Claus, but this is still a Christmas movie and it is making use of the holiday themes and I can think of no better person to have this discussion with. So again, I thank you for returning to the movies and doing this discussion with me. Certainly, we'll have you back on in the new year. But before I let you go, let everybody know where they can stalk you in the best possible way on social media and give another plug for your podcast.
Sure. So on Twitter, if you want to follow me and become a convert to the Church of Art the Clown, you can follow me at the Sanderson Bro. Um, Follow me on Letterboxd if you want some of my movie reviews. If you want to read my full reviews for the Terrifier movies at A Caruso 929. And again, follow my year-round Christmas year-round Christmas podcast that also delves into Halloween and Thanksgiving around that time of year as well. Um, Tis a podcast wherever you listen to and download shows. And you can find all our social media through that at linktree.com/tis a podcast. And as Phil mentioned, me and him and our buddy Chris Evans of Gathering of the Geeks also host pretty much bi-weekly for the most part, a bi-weekly DC Comics, DC Movies podcast called DC Unlimited. So would really appreciate you guys checking that out as well. And as the song says, Phil, listeners, I hope you all have a terrifying Christmas.
Well said, my friend. Well said. And what a perfect way to close us out here today. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this Christmas centric episode. I'll be back next week, and we will do this all over again for the love of movies.